System of a Dog. This is Jason and this is Kelly. We're going to answer some questions that were asked earlier on our Sunday Q&A. I'm going to ask a question and then we're going to answer it together. So the first question we had was they had a Frenchie that is food aggressive with food and food bowls. The Frenchie also tries to bite at anything that she tries to pick up. What can she do to help that?
Probably number one, the very first thing you can do is just simply acknowledging the times and situations that these things are happening, and maybe until you come up with a plan of how to fix it, you can manage that. You can manage that by maybe having a dog in a crate a little more. You could have it by the dog dragging a leash. I mean, usually when you're getting aggression and resource guarding, there's more that's going on than just like the dog didn't get taught to sit or lay down. In some way, shape, or form, the dog has formed an opinion of his position in the group or with the person. And usually if they're getting snarky where they're willing to tell you to back up, part of that isn't just that they just did that. The human probably helped reinforce it by the way they also acted with the dog. So meaning the dog probably just didn't start off the very first time coming unglued at level 10. The dog probably did just little things that the human either blew off or let go. So like in answering this question, or really any of them, almost all the fundamental ideas that at least come to my head is always what the person's kind of done or added into this. So if a dog is being aggressive, then in my world, the dog is getting too much autonomy, meaning the dog is in its life is getting too much freedom. It's not asking permission for things. It's just living in a pattern and routine, and then it starts to become entitled and expect these things. And then usually out of it, well, the attitude changes just like it would with a human being. So I mean, it's not really, there's no really like quick answer for any of it, because a lot of it was built up through the human and their own patterns. I mean, usually the first place you start is acknowledging the fact of maybe how much freedom the dog gets and how much unbridled choices they have. That would probably be one of the first places I start, is just, because the first step in changing any of it is changing your own habits. So whether you just got into some really big, deep training program, or if it simply is just you wake up tomorrow and you decide you're going to let the dog drag the leash all day. And all day long he drags the leash, and every time you want to do something with him, you pick the leash up, walk him around with you, let him go outside. He could drag an outdoor leash for that, but we're just trying to build an association to the dog of that when you're around, maybe you have a little more say-so in what's going on.
Also making the dog move. And also, I would say, if the dog is learning to guard and react to resources, trying to minimize the amount of resources he can guard and protect are going to help you make better successful repetitions too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very short question, but the answer for it is extremely long, because there's literally so many angles that it can be taken from. I mean, like sometimes even fixing any of these problems sometimes directly comes down to exactly how the people act, like their own personalities. Like sometimes it's not so much of just do this, do that. Sometimes you got to get a little deeper, and I mean, it could be something simple that no one's even saying, oh, I let the dog sleep in the bed. On a normal situation, that wouldn't mean anything. Who cares if the dog sleeps in the bed? Most dogs aren't going to develop bad habits. But there's some dogs that could claim. So maybe there was no claiming of food in the beginning, but like every time somebody decided to get in the bed, the dog growled a little bit. And over time, that little bit of growling and it never being, the dog never learning that was like a behavior that they should, that it's an unacceptable behavior. Those little tiny angles can feed into the aggression you see with the food. I will say that anything you do with just spending more consistent time, where like if food is a resource the dog is valuing and growling at, sometimes maybe working with the dog with food. So just grab some of his favorite kibbles and just start working with him. So sometimes you can get rid of the aggression, because the dog starts to view the resource as not a resource to keep away from the person, but it's actually a resource that's actually shared between the two. And so it's not looked at, and it's not viewed upon that there's a conflict with the food, meaning that if the human has it or if the human can get away from me, it means I won't get it back. Like, so just like it's almost a similar principle as like when people try to do retrieving with the ball, and the dog, when he gets the ball, just wants to run away with it. It's because probably somewhere along the line, I mean, if it isn't just his own personality, the dog has probably made something up in his head that by coming towards the person with this object, the object will be taken, which means it actually makes that object more valuable, and it also makes it more of a reason to not approach. So the food can be looked at the same way. Like, the food is something that's going to be taken away, or you're going to chastise me about it. Maybe, like, even in that question, we don't know if they had done other things from another trainer that maybe resource guarding at the beginning wasn't even there. And maybe they had them, maybe some trainer, they decided, oh, we got to put our hands in the bowl, right? And put our hands in the bowl, and the dog's got to be able to deal with it. Well, we don't know if maybe there is something even taught in that. So even when we answer this question, or a lot of them, I mean, it will come down to actually being a fly on the wall and being able to see what's actually going on, because, the truth is your truth, my truth, and the real truth. So what you think is happening, what's actually happening, and, that's, so to start off with, using some of the food of their daily rations, getting them just come up with some sort of little dance routine, where you teach them to sit and follow you and maybe lay down or get up on, jump up on something, and make a little, agility course inside your house where they learn to jump up on stuff and jump off of it. Like, all of that can even alleviate aggression just because the food's being related differently. Leaving a leash on the dog and just starting to manage his space and time and not letting him, roam from one room to another. That can have an effect on a dog and start to make them follow you more instead of just, being on top of the pyramid, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's just it's a process. You got to, I mean, number one is you got to change your habits, because all your dog's habits are based on your habits. So if you're unwilling to change, most likely the dog's never going to change either. So that's, yeah, I mean, I wish that answer could be just very clear cut, dry, do A, B, and C, and you're done, good to go.
They usually aren't.
Well, and sometimes it's just the
easy.
dog, yeah, and sometimes it's even the dog's personality. I mean, some dogs don't want to change just because somebody would say they're sorry for an act they do. They might only be sorry because they got caught. That doesn't necessarily mean they're sorry at what they did.
And they mentioned they have an 18-month-old. This is a 2-year-old Frenchie, and they have an 18-month-old Frenchie that doesn't do that. And that goes into, where the dog thinks it lies in the pack, and also just their personalities are different.
Well, the reality is that if you're assaulting anything, I mean, if all you're doing is picking something off the ground, and the dog is just like, I'm going to get you for that. I mean, yes, yes, the dog needs help, the dog needs train, the owners need help, the owners need train, but the behavior is still a choice, and the behavior is aggressive, and most likely, almost 9 times out of 10, any aggressive behaviors that are coming out are almost directly related to having too much freedom, and nobody's actually directing the life of the dog. No one's actually saying, do this, don't do that, come back here, go away from that. Most people, I mean, even in our business, most people don't call unless there's either pottying, destruction, or aggression. I mean, we get a few people that call because they want obedience, but most likely it's because those are the real reasons, those are the real concerns of what people have.
Or pulling on a leash.
Yeah, but I mean, most of that, a lot of that all still comes from autonomy, having too many freedom of choices, and then when that happens, well, I mean, whoever said that dogs are supposed to be choosing what we wanted? Whoever said they even wanted what we wanted? So when you take that into consideration, yeah, it may take a minute to get your dog not to be aggressive, or it may take your dog a minute to do any of it, but yeah. I mean, with this particular question and with food aggression, I mean, it's a touchy situation because you don't want to promote it, you want to decline it. Yeah, the first place I would start is simply even just maybe don't feed directly out of a bowl. So you can free feed, or not free feed, but you can like do a find it game. Some people called it scatter feeding or something, and just tossing food around so the food's not consolidated.
Well, there could be some aggression with that the dog is food aggressive.
Yeah. I mean,
It just depends on the dog.
Yeah, I've seen some dogs that just sometimes when the food is not consolidated, the aggression goes away because as soon as they eat it, there's nothing to guard.
Yeah.
Um, usually starting to work with food and starting to get like look at basics. I mean, I normally don't always just go to obedience for my go-to, but just as a general question, if I asked these people about their dog and said, does he even know how to sit or lay down, and they were like, he doesn't really know how to do either, and if he does do it, he can't do it for very long. Well, I would say that's probably one of your bigger things, even right there, is the fact that you're probably not working with this dog long enough. And I don't know them, I don't know any of these people, but just as a general, you probably are not asking enough of the dog. Meaning that if you do ask obedience, it's probably that blip when you're in the kitchen, you're cooking, you got some food, you ask him to sit, or it's the rudimentary just I'm feeding at this specific time, and before I feed him, I have him sit, I put the bowl down and make him wait for 2 seconds. And I mean, like, that's all good and dandy, but out of a 24-hour day, that's like taking your kid that you want to teach him the alphabet and only taking about 3 minutes to teach the letter A and then never coming back to it again.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they're 19 years old, wondering why they, they can only spell half the alphabet. Well, you didn't do any reps. You didn't really put any time into learning that skill or habit. So I mean, so for that question and part of it, I mean, like really, it's just overall, how much are you working with the dog, and how much freedom are you giving it? Because I can tell you this: the more freedom you have, the less you're going to have them caring, right? They're not going to work for you if everything's paid for.
And just because it's a small dog does not mean the rules should be different. Like a lot of people have a tendency to give smaller dogs more leniencies and more freedoms and more things that a bigger dog would not have gotten away with. And so it's important to view all dogs the same regardless of their size. So that's a big mistake a lot of people make as well.
Well, I was telling a client the other day, I was like, if I took a few people from every continent or country on the planet where everybody spoke a different language than English, and I was going to teach everybody English. Everybody in the room could be dark, light, short, tall, fat, skinny, you know what I mean? Like it just all the way across. If I'm teaching the alphabet for English, A is still A, B is still B, C is still C, D is still D. Like I don't pronounce it different for another ethnic, for a different country. Like that is the alphabet. So whether it's a big dog, little dog, long hair, short hair, working, show line, like an alphabet's an alphabet. Your direction is your direction. I mean, sometimes it's how you get there's a little different depending upon the breed. Just like people, we all learn differently. We all deal with things differently. So, the specifics of each comes in, but that's when you're standing in front of the dog. But basically, I mean, whether it was a rat terrier or, a Caucasian mountain dog, teaching dogs markers or teaching dogs how to walk nice in the lead, it's all the same darn thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the same thing. But I mean, for an aggressive Frenchie, number one, freedom's going against you, so the more the dog can just go where they want, do what they want, and never have to ask for permission, that's going against you. If they get free food, if the food's just being given to be given, well, that could be it too. Is the dog overweight? That would be a big thing. Is the dog neutered? That might have a hormone issue. Never heard of anybody having a hysterectomy that didn't get a hormone replacement. So the dog could be neutered and have hormone problems that are even, and then if he's overweight, hormone problems with being loose out of a crate, never being asked to do anything. Like it's all stacking on top of itself.
Well, if the dog has the ability to guard something and say it's mine and push you away, do you have the ability to tell your dog to stay over in a different space and so that you can guard it and say, no, you stay away?
Yeah, or just pick it up. Yeah.
So you need to be able to have that. If he can push you, can you push him? Like there has to be a balance here. And if he's being able to call the shots, then your relationship is not healthy. It's not the way it should be for the dog to succeed.
Well, the dog's in a human world. They don't understand. I mean, the dog, even by standards, the dog's still not doing anything wrong. I mean, a dog is wrong like a tree that drops leaves is wrong. They're not wrong. It's just in the interpretation of our world versus theirs. That's where these things are wrong. But, I mean, yeah, they just got to start somewhere. I mean, you got to start getting them onto an obedience program, putting them, getting them back into a crate, managing them a little bit, putting a leash on them.
Rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, we might train a little bit different than a lot of others. So, I mean, really outside of this conversation, that's pretty much all they really have to go on, unless, because, you can't even give too much. If you give too much, like, homework, so to speak, and the dog isn't even the way you think it is, you could be giving wrong homework based on, see, that's one of the problems with this when you're dealing with aggression, is that some of that stuff's so finite that it's hard to comment on it, and you don't want to really give a lot of homework for it, because you don't know if what you'd be telling them without actually seeing the dog and their mannerisms, you might actually even be telling them to do things that are actually going to make it worse. So, but like some of this homework is stuff that it would be a generalization, like whether even this dog had aggression, it would be stuff that if it was a young puppy and you were trying to raise it, it would still be the same, some of the same philosophy. You would still want to use some food and train a little bit and maybe manage the time of that dog and don't let him run around. And then probably like on the last part of all of this is just your biggest thing is like, don't let the dog have access to that behavior. I mean, like, if you're just spilling food on the floor constantly, I mean, I would say maybe don't do that.
Or if you're reaching for something.
Well, yeah,
like maybe he's not allowed to be, if he's on a couch or something, maybe he shouldn't be allowed on the couch.
I mean, put him in a crate, just like have him hang out, but like crate train him again. I mean, you have to give up something. You have to give in to something, because the behaviors of the humans have directly related to the behavior of the dog. The dog just didn't suddenly go, now I'm just going to growl and snap at everybody. He might have done that at the very, very beginning, but by how the owner reacted is what that dog would have decided whether that was a behavior that should increase or decrease. So they reinforced it, and whether not knowing what they were doing or doing it wrong or any of that, it was still reinforced by the human. The human made it all happen. So, I mean, if it started with the person, it's got to end with the person. So there's really no such thing as like training the dog. It's basically you got to retrain the dog as far as who you are to them.
Yep.
Right? Because the dog has learned who you are. If you're weak, the dog sees it and the dog displays it. So, but start off with just maybe starting off with some basic, just working with the dog every day. Think about your management, like crates or leaving the leash on the dog and dragging it around. And then, I mean, that's probably where I would first start. And then once again, just like Kelly said, if you can't get the dog to move away from you, but he can get the dog to move away from you, get you to move away from an object, but you can't get him to move away.
It's unbalanced.
These are some things that you should be looking at. But really, I mean, it's a hard question to answer from one end to the other, and then just like make it completed.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think that was the expectation. I think we're just trying to.
Yeah, I mean, can you fix the dog? Oh yeah, can you fix the dog? I mean, can you make the dog so reliable that you could say like a 6-month-old baby with a bunch of dog food thrown on the ground could crawl all over that dog and be fine? Well, I don't know if I would go that far, but can you get it to where like if I drop something, I can pick it up? If I spill something there, I could tell the dog to go away. If my other dog gets a piece of food, will this dog leave him alone? Yes, you can get all that. Yeah, that's all.
You just have to rebuild the relationship and teach communication and boundaries. That's all part of, keeping him balanced too.
Yeah, but just start there. Just start with something. Start with doing some obedience. Start with managing him a little bit. And some of this is just rebuilding your relationship, because obviously something's wrong, because if the same things were happening in the human world, we'd ask what the heck's going on.
And if you need more help, of course, give us a call.
Yep, just ask another question.
Thank you for the question.